All right, somebody use the stage. I feel like they put this thing up here, like somebody should use it. It's really nice setup, isn't it? I really And just while we're at it, quick little hand for Encore, the AV team that's been making all this happen. As you heard, my name is Greg Offner. I forgot to press that timer, Jennifer. Can you just help me? There's a little play button on that, just that, like, you know, we get paid to speak, and I can get long-winded at times. So that tells me exactly when to shut up, so we can go to lunch and do the fun things.
Yep.
I get the privilege of doing this as a job. So someone earlier said, you know, we have a little bit of guilt and shame about enjoying what we do. I have the best job in the world. This is amazing. And I'm excited to get to share what I do with you because I help organizations in all different industries across all walks and on many continents figure out how to create an environment that is truly engaging. How to get the best out of their people, how to create the best experience for their customers, and how to do it without the stick. We're going to talk a lot of carrot today, not a lot of stick. But how I got here is not as fun. I had a career as a corporate insurance broker. Did that for 15 years. Graduating school with a degree in philosophy, psychology, and music. There were no, that's an appropriate reaction. There were no job offers waiting for me. So I fell into this world of sales, and it was great for a kid who grew up diagnosed ADHD because as long as you sold what you had to sell, nobody cared where you were or when you showed up. Didn't have to worry about being late, just had to worry about being effective. But I didn't really enjoy what I was doing at night. I got to enjoy what I really loved. So I want to show you the best office I've ever had.
Do you remember when?
It doesn't get more engaged than that, friends. It doesn't. Unfortunately, that was the last time I ever got to do that. I flew home from Toronto. That Friday, I had a gig at my local piano bar in Philadelphia. And as I sat down to sing my opening song, what we call a comfort song, it was one that you knew. You didn't need to look at the music or at the words or at the keys. You had to look at the audience. As I sat down to sing my comfort song, I played the first chord and I opened my mouth, and nothing came out. It wasn't nerves. I wasn't nervous. I'd done this 1,000 times before, and I didn't have a cold. It wasn't anything I could figure out, but my voice was gone. And 2 weeks later, doctors would tell me that within 2 months, my vocal cords would be totally and permanently paralyzed, that I would never speak again. And they told me to prepare myself for this reality. Thankfully, someone introduced me to another vocal cord surgeon who, after inspecting my voice, said, you know, I think that we can save your speaking voice, but I don't think you'll ever be able to sing again. So he suggested that I undergo vocal cord surgery. He said if it went well, you'll probably get a speaking voice back. If it doesn't go well, you'll talk with one of those devices that people who have their larynx removed, sort of the vibration noise. That's what my voice would sound like. So spoiler alert, I can talk. But what I did then was negotiate with this world-renowned surgeon. I said, okay, so listen, you think I'll never be able to sing again. What does this surgery look like? And he said, well, you're going to have vocal cord surgery, and then you'll need to be silent for a period of 2 to 3 months while your vocal cords heal. And I see some of you wondering how your partner gets this surgery, right? You're thinking, this sounds like a win, friends. And I said, I don't know if you noticed this, but I am not Adele. No one's going to write a check for me for 8 months, while I build my voice back up, 3 months in silence, 8 months total recovery time. I said, what else can we do? And he looked at me like one might look at a person who was just offered, a check to pay off your mortgage. And he said, yeah, but can I have a bit more, And he said, well, we could do a smaller version of the surgery and see what happens. Because I bargained for that smaller version of the surgery, over the last several years, I've had 15 surgical procedures to repair and rebuild my vocal cords. I don't know if you might be able to see the scar right here from the last one that they did. Midway through that, I lost my job in sales, because any folks folks who are in sales there know you kind of need to be able to speak to do your job. And I prepared myself for the reality that I would never sing again. So I found myself wondering, what is the purpose of being here? What I realized was that I had been doing everything I could to avoid an outcome rather than pursue an outcome. And in psychology, there's a concept called approach avoidance. And that is simply that we will run towards things we want and run from things we don't want. The unfortunate part about how our brain is hardwired and how we've developed as humans is that we are more aware of the things we don't want than of the things we do want. And we've had a great conversation today about what people want from their employment experience, what they want in terms of the purpose that your organization is delivering to the world. Kevin started off the morning by saying that you're going to participate and appreciate. And I don't know if you've been watching my demos, but those are the first two pieces of my framework. So I teach a framework called PACT. And those letters stand for participate, appreciate, collaborate. And if we do that right, it leads to the last one, which is a transformation. That transformation is the tip jar culture. We don't have the hour, and I don't have the piano on stage like I normally do in my full-on keynotes to get into the entire framework. So I wanted to cover the part of it that I felt would be the most valuable for you and for the people that you represent. And so it starts with the question, what is the best concert you've ever been to? Think about the best concert experience you've ever been to. For me, it was Bruce Springsteen. Right, I live in Philadelphia, right across the river from Jersey. You would see Bruce Springsteen. Bruce is known for delivering the longest concerts in rock and roll right now. The last one I saw at Citizens Bank Park in Philadelphia was 4 hours long. This man has won every award that you can win as a rock and roll musician. He's accomplished everything you can accomplish in that field, and still at his age and at his tenure in the industry, he delivers 4-hour concerts. Why? He was asked that on a podcast recently, and the answer he gave astounded me. He said, because I don't know who's out in the audience. I don't know what it took for them to get there. I don't know if it's the 50th time you've seen me or the first time you've seen me. I don't know if you've traveled 5 miles or 5 continents to be here. I'm going to give it all that I can out there. He espouses what a tip jar culture is all about. Even though he's been years from having a tip jar at the front of his stage, he is a tip jar performer. And I have this concert ticket because it's interesting that, in a way, this is our agreement when we show up to an event, isn't it? It tells us what's going to happen, where it's going to be, what time it's going to start, maybe even how much we're going to pay for that experience. It's a very formal agreement that happens between two parties. But there's another part of that agreement that we don't often talk about. It's what's on the back of the ticket. The terms and conditions. Think about your employment agreement at work. We've got lots of thou shalt nots. Don't run on the field. Jennifer was showing me a video of an LSU game that just happened where somebody ran out on the field and was tackled by a bunch of police officers. Don't do that. Don't jump up on the stage. Don't throw things at the performers. I love this one. No therapy iguanas. We're in a different world when you have to say that, friends. But there are other parts of this agreement. I call it a performance agreement. The performance agreement are the first 3 items of that PACT framework: participate, appreciate, and collaborate. That is the performance agreement. When we get that right, it creates the transformation that is the tip jar culture. And I learned about audience engagement from my first mentor at the piano bar world. His name was Mike Marguerite, but just like Air Force pilots and Top Gun adopt their airplane monikers, we all have our own stage monikers. His was the professor. He said, your audience will only engage if they believe you can and will help them get what they desire. So what does your audience desire? When we talk about the first part of this performance agreements framework, we're talking about participation. What is it that engenders, that creates the desire to participate in an experience? We have to believe we're going to get what we want. If we think about this concert experience, if we go ahead and spend $99.25 to go see Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band, what is it that we expect? What do we think they're going to deliver? For some, it's playing all of the hits right before our very eyes. For others, chance to crack some beers in the parking lot with friends we don't see all the time and catch up. For some, it's that Instagram photo that you can share with everyone to prove, hey, I was there. I was part of that. I'm special. Mike taught me we have to know what our audience wants to be able to engage them. And as you saw from that first video, a piano bar is a pretty engaging environment. What if we could create that in the space that we worked? What could that do for not only our productivity and our performance, but our fulfillment, our engagement, our job satisfaction? So that's what I want to focus in on our time today. I'll leave some time for questions. I don't have my piano with me, so I can't take the question when we're done. But if you are one of the first, 2 or 3 to raise your hand and be brave and ask a question, which I'm sure you will have, I've got a special surprise for you, so just come see me after and I'll get that to you. So, participation. How do we know our audience? When I sat down that day at the piano bar to play my comfort song, I played that song so that I could watch the audience and see how they responded to what I was doing. Because there's only 3 types of people in an audience. And there may be 5 you meet in heaven, but I promise you in your organization there are only 3 types of people. And someone earlier talked about the transitory, I actually think it was Samia that was talking about an engagement survey as a snapshot in time. Understand that these types are snapshots in time in the moment, based on what your audience believes you are willing and able to help them obtain. These designations can change at any moment, so this is a different approach than, say, a Myers-Briggs, or a Strengths Finder, or a, what's the PI? Anyway, predictive index. So the first type of person in your organization are your keepers. And I know you're already thinking about who some of the keepers on your team might be, right? I don't even have to describe a keeper because you know it intuitively when you hear that, it's the people we want to keep. But what might surprise you is that there are 2 subsets of keepers. There are the ones we immediately think of. The rock stars. They're out there to kick butt and take names. They want to be on the billboard of everything. They want to conquer the world, and they want you to stand up and party when they enter the building. We'd love for our organization to be full of them, but we know that's not a reality. In fact, rock stars as keepers are maybe 10% of an organization at best. But this next subset of keeper may be even more important. Anybody know who this guy is? Who? No.
Guitar tech. He's the guitar tech.
Yes. Now, in truth, you have no idea who he is. You just know what he does. But that's the beauty of his role. He doesn't want to be on the billboard. He doesn't want to be on the marquee. He loves doing what he does, where he does it, and who he does it with. Yes?
Okay, I guess as Pat and I say, I'm the behind-the-scenes worker who makes it look good.
Okay, so the comment Jackie made was that as the planner, you're the behind-the-scenes worker that makes someone else look good. Yeah. Now, it's not necessarily what you are doing; it's how you see what you're doing. Yeah. So keepers aren't showing up for the paycheck. They're not showing up to build career capital. They're showing up because what they do is a calling. I mean, it's pretty easy to argue that these folks are called to do what they do. Can you see them at McDonald's at the drive-thru? I mean, that does not fall into that persona. That face. But this guy could be anywhere. He could be at Sam Ash, selling guitars. He could be teaching kids music lessons at a school. What is it about him that makes him a keeper? It's that he loves what he does, where he does it, and who he does it with. The difference is, he doesn't want to be on the front of the stage. There was a documentary done not too long ago, I want to say it was called 6 Feet from Stardom, and it was about all of the amazing backup singers that we've never heard of, but without whom many of our favorite songs couldn't be the way we know them. Without guys like this gentleman, whose name I don't even know, our concert experience wouldn't be what they are. There are folks like that in your organization. They don't want to come in on the weekends. They don't want to take on that extra project. They have no interest in that next promotion. But they love what they do, who they do it with, where they do it, and they are integral to the success of our organizations. It seems like we've developed these recognition programs, though, that sort of forget about these people, that sort of treat them as less than, because they don't want that next thing. You're content? You just, are you okay? You have a fever? Have you been coughing? Have you traveled out of the country in the last 2 weeks? I mean, these are folks on whom organization successes are built. And we need to recognize them. Those are our keepers. So two types of keepers, the rock stars and the rock steadies. Our next group are our leapers. I love leapers. Leapers are often what we may call today our A players. They're highly successful. They're not just showing up for the paycheck, but they're also not here because it's a calling. They're here to build career capital. We have a lot of leapers in the workforce right now. What we do with them can change the trajectory of our organization. So earlier, maybe it was Val that cited the Bureau of Labor and Statistics stat that most new entrants to the workforce will change jobs between 2 and 4 years from their first day on the job. So according to the BLS, that's what we've got. 2 years, maybe 4 years if we're lucky. The current approach is to try and retain these folks, to tell them how amazing we are, how great we think they are, and wouldn't it be awesome if this were your office forever? But if we think about the professor's wise words, that our audience stays engaged as long as they believe we can and are able to give them what they desire, how long are we going to keep these leapers engaged if that's the tack we take? Not very long. So I suggest a different approach, one that's being proven out in the world right now. Anybody heard of a company called VaynerMedia? Okay, Gary Vaynerchuk, is that name familiar to anybody? If you don't know who he is, watch a couple YouTube videos and you'll either love him or hate him. Very polarizing guy. Very opinionated, but his chief heart officer, his chief HR officer, a woman named Claude Silver, is undeniably leading the way in terms of employee engagement and treating people the way they'd like to be treated. Here's what Claude came up with. She came up with an alumni program. She created a very simple alumni program for her company such that when anyone comes in and says, hey, I'd like to go here, I would like to do X, or what we all sort of fear is that we get that email, hey, I'm going to do X. Thank you very much. As long as that is an amicable split, Claude enters them into their alumni program. Once or twice a year, she reaches out personally to their personal email or phone or text and says, hey, just checking in, seeing how you're doing. Happy birthday, what's exciting? I'm going to be near you. You want to grab a coffee? You want to catch up? Claude has created a network of global talent ambassadors because everywhere these people go, they're connected with her. They're bringing Vayner in now as a client. They're sending people to Vayner who are better fits for Claude's ecosystem. And those leapers who realize that the grass isn't greener when they land have a quick and direct line back in the door to a place that they love to go. The benefit to Claude is that they've gained valuable perspective and experience that Vayner didn't have to pay for. Think about what would happen if every person that left your organization became a talent ambassador. Because if you think about that water cooler conversation, whether it's real or virtual, how many people have changed jobs in the last 2 years in this room? Okay. Did any of you get to do lunch with your coworkers, or was it kind of virtual? Virtual. Do you remember when we did lunch that first day? Invariably, one of those people, your new coworker, is going to say, so tell me about your old job. What was it like there? What was your boss like? You jerk. They could be a leaper. And when you tell them, oh my God, if it weren't for Claude and VaynerMedia, or if it weren't for insert your name in your organization, I would have never been able to get this job. I loved it there. It was amazing. That person is leaving lunch, finding Claude's phone number, saying, hey, so, just curious, do you have any job openings? You're creating your own recruitment pipeline. And the added benefit is that while they stay engaged, because they believe you will help them get where they want, they're going to give you what you want. Performance, results, engagement. And our last group. Anybody see this coming? Sleepers? Sleepers get maligned out in the work world. We talk about this epidemic of quiet quitting that's happening, and it is just a sexy rebrand. But Val hit it right on the head. That is a failure of leadership. If you can quiet quit, that means your boss has no idea what you're actually expected to do. How can you quiet quit if the performance expectation is, if I'm supposed to be up here for 30 minutes and I leave after 15 minutes, pretty clear I didn't do what I was expected to do, right? That's quiet quitting. We can only look in the mirror and say, what is it that we could have done better to more clearly articulate what we expected of this person, such that they can't quiet quit. I'd argue that what they're really doing is silently striking. If they're choosing not to do their work, they're saying, you know what, I am going to refuse to give you what you want until you listen to me and give me what I want. Yes, ma'am?
I would argue that it's not that leaders don't know what you're doing, it's that they're not listening when you're telling them what you're doing.
So it's not that leaders don't know what you're doing, it's that they're not listening. They're not engaged. I think that's a very astute point. I have a client up in Canada, it's a 300 location restaurant chain. When they brought me in to work with them, the HR director told me that she was in a one-on-one with the CEO, and she wanted to bring in tactical skill development. That's what I thought. She said soft skill development, but we like soft, right? We want tactical skills. So she wanted to develop skills like empathy, gratitude, perspective, negotiation, and not to wait until they became vice presidents, but to do it from day one. She bought in to this concept of Maslow's hierarchy. At the top of the pyramid is something called self-actualization. And in essence, I think it's best explained by the U.S. Army slogan. When I say the U.S. Army slogan, what do you think of? That hasn't been the slogan for nearly 20 years. But that's exactly right. They have gone through more slogans in the last 20 years than they did in the previous 80. The generals who lead the U.S. Army right now in the recruitment division have said we would love to go back to that. Because it espouses something that hits all of us at our core. It has less to do with work and more to do with us as a person. We want to be all we're capable of being. I think Jim Rohn had a quote, how high will a tree grow? As high as it can. But we're often less impressive. And so I agree with your point, and what she said to me was that the CEO told me, I'm not comped on employee development. I'm comped on profitability. It's asymmetrical or misaligned incentives that create that logjam you're noticing. Even if there is executive buy-in, isn't it often the case that sometimes middle managers feel like they need to let me translate for the old man. I know he said we care about people and we care about health, but what he really means is, you gotta get 5 new clients this week or you're not sleeping. You understand? It logjams somewhere in that process. And part of that logjam, how we can address it, is developing leaders from day one, not waiting until they get the title. It typically takes 8 years, at least in the insurance industry where I came from on the professional side, 8 years for someone to get direct reports and a senior title. So they're not just a manager, they're a director or a VP or AVP or something like that. That's 8 years we've wasted not developing these people. Teaching them to be a better accountant when who really cares about being a better accountant? You want to be the best you can be. If being an accountant is part of that, great. I'm not poo-pooing that skill set. But are we developing you as you? Or are you just being developed as a cognitive machine? That's really what this is about, is knowing your audience. When the musician treats their audience as if it's expected, of course you'd show up. I'm Kiss! Did you not know I'd be here? Bow down, please, thank you very much. What audience is going to sit through that performance? But when we appreciate, so the second piece of that framework, appreciation, when we appreciate our audience, and they appreciate us in return, when it's an exchange, when it's a conversation that leads to then collaboration, we get deep engagement, we get personal engagement, we get that I love it here type of engagement. But I digress. We're talking about maybe the least engaged group of people right now, which are our sleepers. So sleepers are there for the paycheck. In the parlance of Office Space, anybody remember that movie Office Space? And they wanted to get rid of Milton, and instead of telling you he was fired, they said, we just stopped paying him. We fixed the glitch. Right? This is sort of like the opposite. You know, they're still getting paid, but they're not really there. They may be physically there, but mentally they're asleep. This is the greatest source of untapped talent that our organizations possess. And you heard earlier, Jackie, I think, said that before the internet, she was reading Robert Half reports about engagement being a problem. For it feels like the last 25 years, we've had fairly stagnant engagement numbers. About 70% of our workforce is disengaged or what they call actively disengaged. That means they're sabotaging your organization. If anybody remembers the budget talks when the government shut down a bunch of years ago, this analogy came out. It's perfect for this example. Here was the analogy. If your home was filling up with sewage, would you want a bigger house or would you want to stop the flow of sewage? Right? That was a conversation about the debt, right? Do we raise the debt ceiling or do we stop spending? Organizations spend millions of dollars and thousands of hours trying to increase engagement, but they have not identified the moment when an employee consciously chooses to disengage. I'm going to tell you that moment before the end of the program, but I want to tell you what we can do for sleepers. We have a responsibility to wake them up. When we wake up sleepers, we're connecting them with a purpose, with a passion. We're having a conversation about what they want and we're listening. And they either become leapers and we help them land somewhere else, or they become keepers. Those are the only two options. I had a friend, his name is Fred, he lives in Staten Island, and he fell asleep on the MTA one day. This is many years ago, and he told me the story. He goes, Greg, I woke up in the bus terminal. It was dark. There was an MTA officer standing over me going, hey, you can't sleep here. So I've never been so terrified in my life. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know what to do. I just knew I wanted to get home. Sometimes that's the reaction sleepers are going to have when we wake them up. They're going to realize they've been caught. They're going to realize that we're about to fix the glitch. And they're going to need our help to move on somewhere else. We have to own the fact that we gave them that cubicle. We gave them that paycheck. We made the decision to bring them in. At that moment, they were engaged. Somewhere along the line, we let them down. We created a moment where they chose consciously to disengage. They stopped believing that we were interested or able to give them what they desired. Probably because we didn't ask. Or we didn't listen. So what do we do? My challenge to you, what I'd like you to take from this session, is that as leaders, your most important job function is to become a friction hunter. Yeah, this is the best picture I could come up with for friction hunter. What will turn a keeper into a leaper or a sleeper is friction. I would argue legacy or unnecessary friction. Some friction is just a part of the job. We need to figure out challenges. But unnecessary friction is what will turn a keeper into a leaper or a sleeper. That is the moment of disengagement, is when your problem as an organization becomes my problem as an individual. Our leaders have the rank and they have the paycheck to figure it out. Get the rock out from my path or teach me how to overcome it. Those are the only two options. Option C is that I decide to disengage and I leave. So if we can create more friction hunters in our organization, we can stop that moment of disengagement, and engagement will happen organically. We're already doing many of the things we need to do to create engagement. Creating a culture of belonging absolutely needs to be on our priority list. But even if we start that, if we're continuing to create moments of disengagement, folks will decide, maybe I don't belong here, and they'll leave. So, that having been said, I'm curious what questions you have for me on these topics. There are a couple good ones asked already. Man, Kahula's kicking it. Everybody's just like, where's that fan boat?
What you do when you have a small organization, where it's hard to delineate those groups, and also when you've built it in a remote environment, where you didn't ever have the opportunity to really train and engage and tether that person to the organization. How do you navigate through that?
So thanks for the question, Margaret. So these are, they're individual, I don't call them labels, but they're individual categories. So there are three questions that I believe we can ask to really quickly get to the heart of how somebody feels about our organization. One would be, hey, skills aside, if you could do anything, if you could work anywhere, any organization, if you could do anything, what would you be doing? If if the answer isn't this, then they're clearly not a keeper. There's something else we can dig a little bit deeper there. Yeah? The second question that you can ask, what is it about the work that we do that lights you up? If they can't answer that question, there's a good bet they're a leaper. Those two questions can help you dig at the heart of what category somebody falls into. And from there, it's an individual conversation, Margaret. It is truly a one-on-one development program for these folks. But the third and final question that I think is super important when we get an answer from a colleague or employee about their goal or about what they want is, what will that allow you to do? So I created this, it's called a root goal analysis process, right? And it's really just a simple framework that's really, really annoying because it's not a way that we traditionally think. Dan Kahneman said there are two types of system thinking, system 1 and 2. One is fast, one is slow. One is like quick and reactive, the other is slow and deliberate. This is slow and deliberate, and it hurts our brain. Take a goal, and after that goal, it could be, I love to use this one with kids, like, I want to be a millionaire so that I can blank. 90% of the time when I'm working with youth groups, their answer ultimately comes down to freedom. They want to experience more freedom. It's what they believe being a millionaire will allow them to do. So if there are all these obstacles and sacrifices that are going to come in the process of being a millionaire, can we shortcut around them and help them get what they really want, which is more freedom? So as our employees tell them about their goal, a great follow-up question is, hey, I'm just curious, when you achieve that, what will that allow you to do? That gives us so much more insight into them as a person, into what they really want, what type of category they fall into. And even in a small organization, even when you're fully remote and distributed, that's going to help you create a connection and develop that individual. Whoa. Okay, yes?
So after you've had these conversations and say, hypothetically, you identified somebody as a sleeper, do you have that conversation like very candid? Like, are you honest with them? Or I've noticed that you've checked out. I have noticed that you don't seem like you're loving your job anymore. Like, do you start with that, or do you mask it a little bit more and dig with different questions so you're not coming off negative? Does that make sense?
It does. What's your name?
Megan.
Megan, thank you for the question. I really appreciate you asking that question because Megan brought up something that I think is fundamentally frustrating about business. That we even have to ask. Should we be honest? Or should we mask it? That's a big part of the problem. Thank you for the question. Thank you for providing this opportunity for this. That's the problem. The interview process, how much of that is really truthful and how much of it is just, please, I need a check, I need benefits. Like, if we were more honest and transparent, it's going to be brutal at first, yeah? But if we were more honest and transparent, the end result a little further down the road would be better than we expect. I want to be conscious of time. So let me tell a quick story to wrap up. I have a 2-year-old daughter. This is our first child, so a week after we got home from the hospital, my wife and I looked at each other and go, why did they let us take another human being from that building with all those experienced people who know what to do with this child? And a couple weeks after, Celeste and I were talking about this earlier, kids getting us sick. A couple weeks after she went into daycare, all of a sudden we're deathly ill. She's deathly ill. We're like, what's going on? We take her to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician goes, it's just a fever. You're insane. Get her some kids Tylenol. You'll be good to go. So I went and got kids Tylenol at Walgreens, and I noticed that it's flavored. I was fascinated by this. Why is kids Tylenol flavored? So they take it, even though they feel like crap right now, and this medicine will make them feel better, significantly better in the future. They won't take it now because it tastes like crap now, right? Feeling crappy now is my current state. This is worse than my current state. Even though my future state is better, I'd rather just keep my crappy current state. That's the problem. We don't grow out of that. That's the problem. We have to take unflavored medicine as adults. We have to do that in our organizations. We have to take some unflavored medicine if we're going to be leaders. We do. Okay, so sorry, a couple of questions. I'm going to stick around after too, so we can ask, because I'll be conscious of lunch and get everybody out of here. Yes, sir.
Oh, it's you, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This concept of perceiving mind shift for people who've been in the industry for a really long time. So many folks who had long tenure in the industry got laid off, got furloughed, and that used to be perceived, longevity was a wonderful thing, right? And now you're the second speaker today that has said perceive your leaper as a positive employee. I don't know that our industry is ready for that. You know, I think there's still a perception of, oh, they've only been here a year. Oh, they've only been here 2 years, and now they're leaving. They got all the good stuff from us, and now they're taking it to Hilton or to Marriott or whoever. I think that our industry, and probably others, need so much more education to understand that that is a positive thing, because you're creating a long-term, engaged associate, maybe not an employee, but long-term engagement. So I think we need a lot of work.
Yeah, it is a mindset shift of, I'm fascinated by these best places to work surveys. I'd rather be a best place to be from. I'd rather be the place that everyone would be dying to have on their resume, because that means you get the pick of the litter when it comes to talent. So if you try to create that with that mindset shift, I think you'll see long-term, more sustainable results.
What was the comfort zone that you were saying?
Sitting on the dock of the bay. It sounded awful that night.
Greg, I have a quick question.
Yes,
It's a bit philosophical,
Okay.
but I want to understand in your mind, love the model, love the stickiness of it. Do you think an employee can be all three during their employee life cycle, or do you think these are static categories and you are basically one or the other?
During their life cycle, yes. I don't know that you can be all three at the same time. Yeah, I don't know that you can be all
No,
three
not
at the same time. But yeah, absolutely. There are folks in this room, don't raise your hand. You're like hearing this, you're like, oh dude, I'm a sleeper. It happens in every audience. Absolutely, that's a great question. These are not fixed and static. These are tomorrow, if a leadership change happens or an initiative direction changes, you can go from sleeper to keeper like that. It's a decision. Thank you very much, everybody.